dia dah ada dalam ni dah.
Hai, selamat pagi semua.
Tak boleh.
Hi everyone, we will be starting in at 10 o'clock sharp. So just another 2 more minutes to let someone coming in.
H ke?
Orbit. KKM orbit pun dia tak renew ni. Ada tapi tak renew. Dia macam, saya nak guna sekarang ni. Itu je nak guna. Saya tak risau apa.
Iris, if let's say there are still some participants coming in later, you help me to admit them.
Yeah, sure.
All right, sure. Right, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar session. So we'll start this session right now. So my name is Catchy Titles, and I'm the host for this whole series of the webinar today, as well as for tomorrow. So just a brief background, this webinar is brought to you by IES Research, a theme that provides research publication with an engaging voice through the adaptation of the IES storyboard of Big Why, and What. So what we do basically is we help researchers to design visuals, animations to supplement their research findings, maximizing the understanding of your wonderful discoveries. And lastly, we help to share this whole story globally to improve your research visibility and increase scholarly engagements. So this whole webinar series would be divided into 4 sessions. So there will be the read and write session for today, which is from 10 to 11 is the read session. And we'll take a 5 minutes comfort break after the first session. Then we'll continue the second session on write. And the following 2 sessions will be conducted tomorrow at the same time, 10 to 12 as well. So there are total of 4 speakers for this 4 session as well. And we have all the 4 speakers here today as well. Miss Yuvarani Nair and myself, it's from Malaysia. And we also have our 2 colleagues, one Miss Iris Shu in Taiwan and Dr. Wang Wei-Fu from Singapore. Okay, so there are basically two main objectives of this project that we sign up with NIH. So there are also 2 group of audiences here. So the first group of audience is that we actually NIH selected 20 papers, research publication, to be curated and transformed into an IES story, or in other words, we call it a research highlight. It's a one single page of, sorry, let me mute some things, there's some noise, okay. So it's actually a one single landing page online, which serves like a teaser or a trailer of your research paper. So we will elaborate more about what is IES story in the coming session. Basically, in the short, it's just a teaser. So this whole project, we sign up, we will help to curate these 20 papers into this so-called research highlight. And I hope there are at least I think all the groups has been divided from NIH management. So I hope there will at least one speaker or one representative from the group for each paper is actually within this call. If you are here, you can just say hi, type hi in the chat box, okay? So, and the second objective is that we also open up this whole session to all the other researchers within the NIH group as well. And the purpose is to share with you guys let you guys know some of the tips of how the whole research outreach workflow actually going today. So we also prepared a curation workbook. This is basically a workbook that you guys could use to practice it. So after attending this every session here, basically you could go back and just, oops, let me just paste the link here. So I just paste the Google Drive link here, which you could download and access this curation workbook. It's a Microsoft Word file, just a couple of questions there, like a guided questions to help to organize your thoughts a bit. So every session you could answer a few questions. And if let's say you would like to get some feedback from us, you could fill it up and just send it back to us, and we're more than happy to provide the feedback to you. So you could basically use this methodology and apply it back to your own research paper in the future when you want to curate your paper into a story, or you want to do any sort of promotion. You could do it by yourself as well. Okay, but it's not compulsory at this phase, right? So without further ado, let me welcome our first speaker today, Ms. Yuvarani Nair, a research curation consultant at IES Research, to kickstart the topic, read the full text structurally. So Yuva has an extensive experience in transforming complicated research papers into plain language summary in the past, which requires her to digest research papers from across different disciplines, get the essence of it, and summarize it in simple language. So her sharing today will be based on her own experience. And the entire sharing will be approximately 30 to 45 minutes, and we will have the remaining time for Q&A. But throughout her session, if let's say you have any questions that pops up in your mind that you wish to ask, you could just type it up at the chat box. Then we would jot it down, and we will have a discussion later at the end during the Q&A session. Okay, so without further ado, let me pass the ground to Yuva to kickstart the session today. Yuva, your show.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Casey, for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our training session. And to start off, I'm going to, sorry. Okay, so to start off, the first session would be on read. Okay, so as mentioned by Casey, I work a lot with scientific manuscripts, and my specialty, I specialize in giving scientific discoveries a compelling story, a voice through either plain language summaries, research impact stories, or even to help with infographics and all that. So just to add on a little bit on my background, I majored in biochemistry. And I actually started off my career as a researcher at University Malaya Medical Center. So apart from assisting in drug discovery research projects and also conducting clinical observations, a large portion of my time was dedicated to literature survey. And therefore, a lot of reading time was needed for me to equip myself with sufficient knowledge in order to aid my supervisor at that point. Then after, I pursued a career in teaching. So reading again played an essential role as the knowledge that I needed to impart to my students had to be current and had to be proven. So having experienced and witnessed the struggles of coming up with an efficient reading process, because right now as a research curation consultant, my job also requires me to read tons of material so that I could help to convert them into a compelling story, right? So having this sort of experience, what I would like to share today is, although the title states as read the full text structurally, I'm pretty sure that all of us over here as researchers, as scientists, we sort of have mastered the art of reading. But right now, what I would like to share is more on the reader's experience, okay, to get a better reader's experience. And in order to aid a better reader's experience, how can we actually structure our research paper? So it sort of goes hand in hand with writing your manuscript in future, as well as how would you tackle in reading or to actually provide the readers a better understanding, a better guideline or a better process, smoothen the process of reading for them. So the entire, my entire sharing would include 3 parts, which is the introduction. The second part is on structured reading methods, and the last one is AI-assisted reading simulation. So according to a 2002 framework, which was suggested by a RAND reading study group, comprehension or reading for understanding is actually a process of simultaneously extracting and constructing meaning of written words. So there are 3 parts to this entire process. So the 3 dimensions to this entire process is that you have to consider the text, the context, as well as the reader. The reader over here means the reader's background and ability, I mean, whether he or she is a native reader or not, okay? So when you want to structure reading, right now, what I'm going to focus on mostly... Yes?
Because at least you know you are here.
Hello?
Oh, let me mute everyone first.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I muted you as well.
Thank you.
sorry
Okay, no,
about that.
it's okay, it's okay. Okay, so yeah, so back to reading, right? So I'm not going to touch much on the reader's background for the moment. Perhaps later on, I would I would touch on this portion of it a bit. So what I would like to emphasize on at the first half of my during the first half of my presentation is the text and the context. So I would like to make a note that the proficiency, yes, in English is important, which falls under the reader's background. But in order for us to look at how readers generally approach reading, we are going to structure the text and how, as well as how do we extract the context out of the reading process. Oops. Okay. So a study by a researcher from the University of Waterloo suggested to organize reading flow into 3 passes. So during the, there are 3 passes, right? So during the first pass, during the first pass, what generally a reader does is that they usually skim through the entire paper. So when you skim through the entire paper, what you look at is you look at the titles. Okay, so the title is very important for you to understand where the research is headed to, or whether or not, like, the keywords in the title would help a reader to decide on how to select the paper, whether or not the paper is relevant to them. And then after that, the skimming process would also include abstracts, okay, reading the abstracts. If plain language summary is available, then they could probably look into the plain language summary. And then they would look at the introduction, okay? Some might even jump into the conclusion, but most of the time they would look at the introduction to get a general idea of how to read a paper. What is the paper about during the reading process? And then what happens is that after you skim through this, you sort of get the idea of where the entire research is headed towards, right? And what a reader does is that the reader goes through, after selecting the paper, they go through the second pass. So the second pass would be something where they actually pay attention to the key points. So during this pass, what a reader does is that they try to identify what is original in the paper, what is so novel about the research or the findings. So this is where they focus, they really elaborate, they extend their understanding from the conclusion into the discussion. They look at the discussion of what sort of approach that the research has taken, and how have you, how have the author come to an end or come to a conclusion. And then if they are interested in replicating the research or a particular method or a technique emphasized in this the paper that they are reading, then they would look into the methodology. So as they are doing this, they would also screen through the tables and figures to get a better understanding of what the paper is about. And normally why a reader picks your paper is that one, it is to aid their research, the experiment process. But second is also mostly is because they would like to include your work into their writing, okay, where they would have to cite your work into their literature. So this would require them to interpret the data, which is the third pass. So the third pass, how they interpret the data, actually relies a lot on how the way your paper has been positioned. So when they are trying to interpret the data, as we are all trained, okay, we are all trained in critical thinking, right? So when we are all trained in critical thinking mindset, what we do is that we sort of have these questions that we would like to find answers to. So these questions, what IES has done is that we have tried to compile these questions and put them into a storyboard format. So that is what we call as the IES, the IES storyboard. So there are four main questions that we would like to highlight whenever a reader wants to interpret your paper. The first is the big why, followed by the why, the what, and then the how. The how we don't touch so much because the how is mainly on the method part. So the method part only appeals to a lot of people if they are reading your paper to replicate your method, or either to fine-tune your method, or to alter a bit of your method. So if the method is important for their experimentation, that is when they look into the how part. But majority of the time they focus on the big why, and what. So where do they find these the answers to these questions? Okay, so when you mention the big why is pretty much looking at the so what of the entire paper. Okay, so the big why could either be identified, mainly they identify the big why from your introduction, but sometimes it could also be identified even within your title. Okay, so depending on the types of keywords that you use in your title. But most of the time they would actually look into either the beginning sentence of your abstract or the introduction. So when they're looking at the introduction, what a reader looks for is that they are trying to answer these questions. Okay, is the research topic relevant to me? Is the research topic sharing the same motive or direction, to my research topic? So based on that, they would be able to identify whether or not your paper is useful for them, and at the same time, from there, it would make them easier to actually cite your paper or interpret your paper, interpret your research to be put into their literature support or their literature background. So like for example over here, so this example, it starts off with prostate cancer is the most common male malignancy. Sorry, let me see. Okay, so male malignancy in the United States. So it sort of sets the idea where it tells the reader, okay, this paper is about prostate cancer. You'd be quite surprised that sometimes some of the papers, you really don't find this word prostate cancer in the title at all. And the title is so technical that people don't understand where the paper is going headed towards. So they have to look at the introduction. So it is really crucial if you are to write your paper to state the big why, at least set the direction where this research paper is going towards, so that it meets the expectation of the reader. Okay, so like over here, the depletion of fossil resources. So it sort of gives them an idea on what to look forward to. Okay, where is this paper headed towards and how it could actually benefit my paper. my reading or my understanding or my writing. The next is we look at the why. So when you look at the why, right, the why is actually one of the crucial parts of reading. Why would I say that? Is because the actual reading process, the actual reading process begins with a thesis statement. They would like to look at the thesis statement, okay? So the thesis statement is usually positioned in the last paragraph of the introduction. If a well-written paper, you can find the thesis statement in the last paragraph of the introduction. So this thesis statement, it aids the reading process, similar to how it aids your writing process. It helps to organize the thoughts, revolving around your paper or your research, and then it also sets the limit towards your scientific argument. Okay, so a thesis is a positive declaration that the whole paper then seeks to support with with the argument and the evidence. So a thesis actually answers the question of the paper. So if the thesis has to be your main point, so that when people are reading, they would actually understand what you're trying to prove and what would the take-home message be. So this is where it is important for you to actually structure. When you are writing your paper or when you're writing your manuscript, it is important for you to structure your thesis statement or the why part of your thesis of your research, to actually answer questions like, what is the immediate problem this research is trying to solve? Okay, how is the solution proposed? How is the solution proposed would be relevant to someone who is reading them? Okay, so if we look at the very definition of thesis statement, okay, it is a single sentence, or it could be a single paragraph that is located at the end of your introduction. Okay, it tells the readers about what is your opinion and what is this paper trying to prove, as I've mentioned earlier. So it helps to direct your readers to the main piece of evidence that you will be exploring. So like over here, if you can see the example, right? So what it does is that you have to use the why portion of your research, okay? The why portion or the thesis statement portion of your manuscript to actually make an argumentative assertion about the topic of your research. And then it has to state the conclusion that you are trying to reach within the topic of research. So when a reader is looking at your paper, they would understand, okay, it is a promise that you make to the reader about the scope, about the purpose, and about the direction of your paper. It focuses on, the entire paragraph should be focused and specific enough, okay, which would allow them to understand that it is, it allows you to actually prove them, okay, to prove the boundaries of your paper. So they would understand, okay, these are the limitations, and this is the particular part where this research paper is actually trying to highlight or solve. So, so how do you do that? Okay, people would ask, how do you do that? Or how would you identify? I mean, of course, they don't start off the thesis statement by saying that this is my thesis statement. So how do people identify? Okay, what are the good components of a thesis statement is that you have to have these three things, okay? The lead in, the originality, and the significance. So when I say the lead in, meaning you have to emphasize on what is the immediate gap that you are trying to solve, okay? So what is the immediate gap that is existing? And the originality would actually, it reflects on the gap that you're trying to solve, okay? So if there is, you have to give them, the lead in has to be a specific problem, okay, that you have chosen to solve. And then the originality would reflect on when you actually emphasize on what is lacking, the gap. And at the end, you propose something, right? So your research is going to propose something. So that gives the reader an idea of the significance of the paper. So similar to this. So if you can see these two examples, they have the lead in, okay? So what is the background? What is the immediate problem that they're trying to solve? Why are they trying to solve it? Because there is a lack of something, okay? Or there's a gap in some manner. And then what you are trying to propose, therefore it becomes the significance of your paper. So I'm emphasizing on why a lot is because a lot of times when I read the papers, okay, as a reader myself, I tend not to be able to find this part of it well written. So it sort of becomes a struggle for me to understand where this paper is headed towards. So the next portion right now, I would like to focus on the what, okay? So the what portion, it looks at the findings, okay? It highlights the outcome. So normally when people want to know what is your research about or what your research is contributing towards, they would look at the conclusion. And then to supplement the conclusion, they would look at the discussion. So a reader, when the reader is reading these two portions of your paper, right? So what a reader is trying to answer is that, what are the significant short and long-term contributions of this research? What changes would this research bring when implemented? Or who and how will this research influence, or what are the limitations in this research? So if you, I believe a lot of you are experienced writers, right? So as you are writing, you also have these things in mind when you're writing the discussion and conclusion part of it. So it is important for you to phrase them. When it comes to, like, you have to include phrases like to conclude, or in conclusion, we demonstrated, or this research provides, or based on this study. Okay, so these are the key phrases that helps the reader to identify what exactly that this paper has accomplished. Okay, so and when they have identified what exactly this paper has accomplished, or how exactly it's contributing to the society, or even to the scholarly community, or even to their research, then it would make them easier to process and eventually interpret your research and include them as part of their citation. Okay, so this is when you are doing it manually. Okay, so what is the manual thought process of everyone when they are a reader? Right now, there are also tools. Okay, there are AI assisted tools for you to aid reading. Okay, so when I say AI assisted tools, over here I'm going to focus on one particular tool for text extraction. But before we go into the tool, I would just like to set a context to why we are looking at AI assisted tools for reading. Is that in 2019, okay, Springer Nature came up with its first research textbook, okay, which was purely generated using machine learning. So machine generated summaries of, this entire textbook was basically focused on the machine generated summary of peer reviewed papers published on a specific topic. So right now there are tons of publications, okay? So imagine there are tons of publication over the years of the same topic, and there's no way that researchers would be able to read all of them, okay? So sometimes we have to screen through our reading. But if, let's just say, a machine is to summarize all of this research, okay? So when in need, let's just say it wants to find a quick solution to a dire situation that that the country is facing, or a particular research field is facing. So when the AI tries to automatically scan through this the whole lot of literature that has been produced and summarize the output, there are certain aspects that needs to be included in the research paper itself in order to help the AI to accurately capture whatever that the paper is trying to, whatever research that has been done and whatever findings that is already out there that has been proven. Okay, so one example of how an AI processes is, I'm going to show you using Scholasy. Scholasy, this is the interface of Scholasy. So I've been using Scholasy very much after I became a research curation consultant, because my reading load has definitely increased. And to speed up my reading process, what I've done is that I've I needed help, and the machine learning part, means the machine has been a huge help for me. And the other reason why I chose Scholasy, there are other tools for you out there to explore, but the reason why I'm using Scholasy is because the way Scholasy captures the ideas or the key points are very similar to how a paper is structured. So a paper is structured using the introduction, the methods, the results, discussion, and conclusion, right? So it actually captures them according to the template. So it's a template that is familiar to a lot of researchers, and it's also a template that is familiar to me. So here are some examples of well-structured research papers and how the Scholasy as a tool has managed to capture the key points. Okay, so when you look at the abstract, okay, so Scholasy captures the abstract, so it doesn't just look at the abstract, but what it does is that it also highlights the key point and it underlines the contribution of the paper. Okay, so based on how your paper is written, then it would be able to capture them. So if you have written the paper according to these rules, okay, you have set the direction, okay, your abstract has set the direction, has selected the gap that this paper is trying to fill, okay, and then you summarize the method, and lastly, you state the outcome. So they look into these four aspects of it. Okay, so you see, the first one is you set the direction. They are speaking about viral infections, okay, and relating it to tumors. And then they look at the gap, what is still lacking. And after that, what they look at is that they look at the method that has been used, okay, which has contributed to the outcome. And finally, it states the outcome. So if your paper is, the abstract of your paper is structured well in this manner, then the AI or the machine is able to capture it clearly. So if a machine can capture it clearly, a reader can also capture it clearly. So because the machine over here is sort of overlapping, it behaves how a reader behaves by looking at the way the sentences are phrased. So like, and then there is another portion, okay? So after reading the abstract, and let's just say you want to find out more. So you look at the Scholasy highlights. So Scholasy highlights here is that it captures 5 to 6 bullet points of the entire paper, the key points of the entire paper, or the research highlights of the entire paper. So when you look at this, you have to see that, okay, will the machine be able to recognize the direction? So if you look at this, it is focused on HPV infections. So when it is able to capture this, meaning this sentence has been phrased well enough for the machine to capture. So as a reader, as a normal reader, okay, as humans, we would also be able to capture this part of the direction of the paper if we are reading. And then when you use terms like we found that, so when we found that, so people would understand that, okay, this is where you have contributed to, your research has contributed to the topic that you're trying to solve, or to the problem that you're trying to solve. So these are some of the key terms that would help in future if you're trying to structure your manuscript, help the readers identify the key points, as well as help the machine to identify or capture these key points. And if they want to further look into the other parts of it, but they don't want to go through the entire paper, Scholasy, this particular tool actually summarizes different portions of the paper. So if you have clearly stated that what is your aim, so then Scholasy would be able to capture it under objectives and state that the authors aim to identify what. So imagine this as a person who is reading, when you have stated something that this research aims to identify, the reader could actually, it improves the reader experience. They could actually directly understand what you're trying to contribute to. Same goes to the conclusion as well. So it is how you phrase your sentences, you know, demonstrated. We found that. So these are all guiding tools for the readers to understand your paper well. So here are some other examples. Okay, so this example here is for the first time. So over here, you see this paper has highlighted, Scholasy has highlighted this particular sentence as well for the first time from what, okay, so this, what it's trying to do is that it's trying to emphasize the originality. So if you are doing a research that is original, it's for the first time, please highlight that, okay, or at least state that to the benefit of to the benefit of the reader, or you know, to the knowledge of the authors, this is the only study, so that people know where to find, or miss, what is the originality of the paper. Same goes to when machine tries to extract it. Okay, so when you look at this, then we realize that it has developed, okay, something. And if you see, when you structure your paper, when you put something that, okay, how is it useful to, okay, you highlight the future applications of it, it sort of helps guides the readers to understand where this particular research contribution is headed towards, what sort of impact that it can impose. So this is another example. So this example here is more on focus, it focuses more on proving of concept. So if let's just say you are trying to prove a concept, so you state sentence, you have to use phrases like consistent with the previous observation, our data indicated. So it sort of tells the reader that it is not something that is very new, but what you're trying to do is that you are proving an existing data, you're proving an existing concept. So it is important for you to shape what the reader understands from your paper. So here are some examples of challenging reads as well. So this is something that I had to work with. So if you look at the title, right? You look at the title, honestly, I have no idea where this paper was headed towards. So after looking at the title, this is because I am forced to work on this paper. So I had to look into the abstract. Okay, but as a reader, you would understand the moment you don't understand the title, you don't really want to look into the paper anymore. But right now, when we look at the abstract, so when we look at the abstract, it came up with, we demonstrated high quality, a whole portion of jargon was there, and I have no idea. The machine was able to capture this as the contributing part. I understand that this is what they are contributing to, but where is this paper headed towards? What exactly is this paper trying to solve? I had to look further into the paper. Then I realized, oh, they are trying to improve LED's structure. Okay, so these are some kind of, these are some of the examples where you are supposed to avoid doing it. Okay, try to set the directions. Examples that have shown earlier, they set the direction. They sort of tell you what is the main topic of the research in the title as well as in the abstract itself. Okay. And then they further look at the other portions of the paper. So even as you look at how the machine is able to capture, but even as you look at whatever that has been captured, it is so hard for a person who is not from the same field to understand what this paper is trying to contribute. So yes, certain papers require a lot of jargons, but try to rephrase them so that, or restructure the sentence so that even though there's a jargon, the reader would still understand or still try to grasp what is your context about. So this brings me to the summary. Okay, so to summarize it, what I would like you to take away from my presentation is that first, you have to structure your research article. Okay, so when a person reads, in future as you write, you please do take into consideration whatever all the points that I have mentioned earlier. Okay, and as you are reading as well, look at the structure of your research paper. Look at the portions that I've highlighted, like the thesis statement under the introduction, or the topic statement in the introduction. And then you focus on the discussion, you focus on the conclusion. Okay, and it is crucial for you to construct a good thesis statement and also use clear guiding terms. So why are all these 3 points crucial? Is that it is to improve the reading experience of a reader, okay, so that a reader can have a better reading experience. Okay, and when you structure your article in that manner, it sort of helps the reader to answer the questions of the big why, the what, and even the how. Okay, and ultimately improve machine reading, because okay, as a person, I might get help from other people to from an expert to understand the context. But a machine, what a machine does is that it just screens through and looks at the key patterns or the sentence pattern to identify. So if you do not phrase them appropriately using clear guiding terms or by constructing a good thesis statement, it reduces the accuracy of the machine to actually extract the contributions of the paper. Okay, so that is, yeah, that's the end of my sharing. I'm open to any questions.
Yep, thanks Yuva for the insightful sharing. We do have one question from the floor that would like you to elaborate a little bit more on regarding the originality from the thesis statement.
Okay, so the originality from the thesis statement is that, okay, in the thesis statement, I mentioned about the lead in, the originality, and the summary, right? So the lead in would be you emphasizing on the problem, the particular problem, because the thesis statement is you are not solving all the problems in that particular topic or under that particular research topic. You're solving a particular problem. So it has the lead in sentence. And then you emphasize on why isn't there a solution to that problem? Meaning there's still a gap, whether there is a gap in the methods that they have used, or a certain portion of the concept that has not been explored. So when you emphasize what is lacking to solve that particular problem, what is lacking, that highlights that you are going to solve this problem because there is this gap. So it is original. It's not something that you are doing. You're not replicating someone else's research, but what you're doing is that you are solving a particular area where there hasn't been a solution, there hasn't been a solution that has been constructed. And then you move on to the last sentence, which is your significance. So your significance would highlight the fact that by doing this, by researching on this, or by using this particular method, we are actually filling the gap that has been identified to solve the problem. So you move from the significance, it highlights what is the originality. So it sort of gives your research, okay, the entire paper, a value to state that, okay, there is a problem, there is a gap, why they did not miss, why is this a problem, and then this is how we are going to solve the problem. So this emphasizes on the originality of your research. I hope that answers the question.
Right. But actually, I have one question as well. From
Yes,
what you have
okay.
shared, this whole methodology, because like normally what I think most people, like myself as well, when we read research paper, we usually follows the flow, like the title, the abstract, then followed by the conclusion before even reviewers, I believe editors, they do that same. They just follow, they read your title, abstract, conclusion, then they decide whether if it captures their attention, they will read further. So how does this method actually difference as compared to the one that you shared?
Okay, it is not very different. Okay, it is actually part of it is something that readers are used to, okay, familiar with. But what I'm trying to emphasize here using the method that I've mentioned earlier is that there are 3 parts to reading. Okay, so the method that you have just mentioned, you look at the title, abstract, and then you jump to the conclusion. That is usually the screening process. People use that method to screen for the paper that is relevant to them, to identify which paper is relevant to their research, to select those papers. But after selecting the papers, that is not the end. Just by looking at that, they wouldn't know what the paper is about, or they would pretty much understand what the paper is about, but it doesn't help them much in terms of their writing or even in terms of their experiment. So the second part of it, okay, the second part of it is actually to interpret those data, to actually elaborately identify the key points. So when a reader wants to identify those key points, it is best to structure or to look for the structure that is similar to their thought process. So the storyboard that I have showcased earlier, right? So that storyboard is structured in a manner to replicate the thought process. So when we think of, okay, why is this important? Why is this crucial? So after selecting, the method that you have mentioned earlier is selecting. After selecting, I have got questions that I need to answer. So how to approach them? That is what my method earlier was trying to emphasize on, and how a reader would be approaching your paper. So later on, my colleague will be sharing about writing, right? So even that you are the author of your paper, you know the ins and outs of your paper, but sometimes when you're reading back and trying to convert whatever that you have written into a plain language summary, you need to have these thought processes to help you or to guide you towards structuring that entire the entire summary. So that's I guess that's the difference that I would like to emphasize through my sharing.
Right. Thanks, Yuva. I think just one. Do we have any more questions? Let me just take a look. Any more questions from the floor? You could feel free to type it out at the chat box, or you could just unmute yourself and speak up. either way is fine. Yuva is more than happy to speak
So,
with you.
yeah.
Yep. Okay, so there's one question here. Would like to seek for your opinion on using catchy titles. Yeah, I think this is quite interesting because, like you mentioned earlier, some of the research titles are pretty technical, like they won't even know. But also at the same time, they need to maintain their subject, discipline. They want to showcase that some terms on jargons you can't be replaced, right? So how do you juggle in between catchy titles and technical?
Okay, so first you have to ensure that your catchy title, as fancy as it may be or as exciting as it may appear, it has to have, because right now we are speaking about the titles on the research paper. So the titles on the research paper has to reflect keywords, okay? So when you want to include catchy titles, please do not disregard your keywords as well. So because when you disregard your keywords, or at least the topic, the main topic of your research, it sort of misleads the reader, or that misleads the reader's expectation. But if you would like to experiment with catchy titles, then I would suggest supplementing your paper. Like, let's just say you already have got your research paper, right? When you supplement it with a plain language summary, or a snippet, there you use your the creativity to come up with catchy titles. So when you're trying to come up with catchy titles, try to look at pain points. Okay, if you have a research topic, okay, why would someone be interested in the research topic, and what exactly when they are when the person is interested in the research topic, what exactly would be their trigger? So you have to search for those trigger words. Then you incorporate it to form a catchy title. Don't mislead them, because I've seen that sometimes the catchy title could actually end up misleading the reader's expectations as well. So
Right.
on your research paper, try not to experiment too much. Try to be as clear as possible in your title of your topic, okay, the main topic, and exactly what is it about. But experiment the different styles when you supplement it. And I guess later on, Casey, you would be sharing on how to promote your paper, right? So this would be more on your expertise as well.
Precisely, actually, yep. Thanks, Munira, for raising this up. I'll actually elaborate more on the promote side, because like what Yuva mentioned, whatever you have published in the research paper, the title, it can't be changed. But the whole beauty of when you're doing the actual outreaching on social media, when you're creating the IES story, your highlight of the research page, that you could kicks in a lot more creativity part to play around with the headline. So in my session tomorrow, there will be one part where we'll be working out how the tips to create multiple headlines for the trailer of your research paper. So please drop by tomorrow if you are available. Right, then let's take, I think that we could have time for one more last question here. Nasni, yep, your paper for examples. Yeah, basically, okay, this one that's characterizing on. Is this part of the paper? No, right? This one is not the selected one, right?
Sorry?
This paper, characterization of sodium channel mutation in dengue,
Yes.
looks familiar. This one is the paper,
Yeah,
right?
this is this is one of the paper. Yeah.
Yep, Nasni, I remember this paper is actually one of the selected paper within this whole project. So yeah, we are actually working on the entire plain language summary, we're creating the IES story, and we will be discussing with you in the later session during the more coaching part, and we'll run through for your comments as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. One last question here. Is there any literature or published paper on readers' behavior as what you have mentioned, looking from the reader's expectation?
Yeah. I mean, two of the examples actually I showcased earlier. The first one was the three circles. Remember the text, the context, and the reader. And then the other one was the 3-pass approach, right? So these are papers. These are initial papers, okay, that has been published to understand readers' behavior. especially when it comes to research articles, not just any reading, but more on research articles. So, and these are the approaches that people has taken, especially the 3-pass approach. These are the approaches that people has emphasized on how you could, look, means how a reader reads and how a reader actually interprets the data. And if you look into those papers, you sort of get an idea of how you can actually restructure the way you write or restructure the way you present your message to fit a reader's behavior. I mean, to fit a reader's behavior, as well as to supplement the reader's experience. So yes, there are actually the two that I've showcased earlier are one of the early ones, the pioneering ones. There are actually many other research or published articles that you can actually look into to understand a reader's behavior.
Right. Thanks, Yuva. So I think we are about time. So let's take a 5 minutes comfort break, and we'll be back here at 10:54. We'll kickstart the next session. Okay. So if let's say you have any other questions as well, you could still drop by at the chat box. Yuva will still be here for the next session as well. So I'll see you at 10:54. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I hope everyone is back, and I still see someone is joining in. So, yep, let me just do a quick recap back of this whole objective for the interest of those that joined late or just joined. So, this whole webinar series that basically we are doing, we are aiming for two objectives here. We understand there are two group of audiences here. So the first objective that we do this whole project is that we have signed up with NIH and they have selected 20 research papers for us to do the curation, where we will transform these 20 papers to create the IES story, or in other words, is the highlight, the one-page research highlight or trailer that serves for the promotion on outreaching to the global communities through social media channels. So, and the second objective is we basically run it as a training approach to update NIH researchers, to open up to all the researchers within your entire board. So to basically update what are the whole entire research outreach framework and guide them through what are the essential steps that needs to be done. So you look at read, write, draw, promote. These 4 steps are basically the workflow of research outreach. We start off by what Yuva has shared earlier on, by reading. How do you read your full text structurally in order to extract some of the highlights or the key essence or messages from your research paper for you before we want to craft out your plain language summary. So in the coming session, like shared by Iris later on, which will be on the right part, where you will get after you have organized your thoughts, you get together all the information you need. Now you need to put into practical, where how do you write your plain language summary? What are the things that the structure or the flow that should be in place? So like people in the past often like juggle between like, what is the difference between plain language summary? What is the difference between abstract, right? And abstract is supposed to be a summary, right? So how does it differ? There are so many different definitions across publisher. That today, like you go Elsevier, you will see that they call it like research highlight. You go to Springer or Wiley, they call it plain language summary. But who are the target audience for this plain language summary? Is it really for public or researchers, policy, funders? A lot of questions running through the head. So in the Iris session, she'll basically clear up some of these doubts to make you understand more. And tomorrow's session on the draw and promote. Draw part is basically to create graphical abstract, to organize your thoughts. How do you mind map? How do you create an image that could represent your research papers? Because as we know, a picture speaks 1,000 words, right? So just plain language summary itself is still plain text. So in order to enhance that kind of the message, you will need to supplement with graphics or visuals. So that session will be shared by Dr. Wong from Singapore tomorrow. And the last session will be run by myself on promote. So after you have gathered the whole IES story have been produced, the next step is to figure out how do you do the actual promotion. And social media is one good channel today to do the promotion. So in my session part will be more on touching on some social media basics and how do you create converting your PLS into social media snippets. How do you create attractive, engaging headlines, for example? So that would be the whole flow of it. Okay. So I think everyone is back here. So without further ado, let's introduce the next upcoming speaker, Miss Iris Xu from Taiwan. Iris is our research impact consultant, and her main consultancy work focuses on designing end-to-end research workflow that captures impact evidences for researchers. So in her experience on working research outreach projects in the past in countries like Taiwan, Indonesia, China, Japan, she had the chance to deliver several face-to-face curation training as well, and personal consulting to researchers across multiple disciplines. So let me pass the floor to Iris to kickstart her sharing today. Iris, your show.
Thank you, Casey. Hi, everyone. Good morning, and it is great to be here to share everyone with the topic how to write a good plan language summary. So let me start my session by sharing it. Okay. So today my focus will be how to write a good plan language summary of your work. So basically it is a topic next to what Yuvarani just shared, is that after you read your paper and conduct or your research, etc., and complete your research paper, there is also one important thing left to do, because when you submit your paper to the publisher, or sometimes you want to communicate your research to a wider audience, for example, in a conference, although it is not quite the case in this COVID-19 situation. However, you might still sometimes need to present your papers or present your research in a webinar, for example. So it is very important for us and for you as a researcher to know how to communicate your research work in a simple language and short and sweet form, so that audience, including your policy makers, for example, including funders, including your patent, for example, could understand what you're doing and how your research would be benefit for them. Okay, so the outline for today's presentation from me will be first what is actually a plan language summary, and then how to write a good plan language summary, and then how this plan language summary concept can be applied to your research presentation, for example. So let's take a look at the definition first. Although, as Casey just mentioned, there are several terms are used to describe the same meaning as plan language summary. For example, you might heard of lay summary. You might heard of research highlights. But the basic concept behind those terms are actually the similar meaning, which is brief outline of a research project. And this brief outline is not the same as abstract, because it conveys the information, conveys the complicated concept of research into a form of more open, transparent, and accessible format. It is not trying to dumb down the scientific information, but it is very important to be able to speak or write about your research in a way that potential funders, supporters, policymakers, patents, or general public or the community can understand. Because the research is all about solving everyday life issues and helping to improve people's life, including health, including their living environment, including the economic, including the process. So it is very important to convey that message into the actual users or actual benefiters of your research, so that they can understand. And if we look at the term, if we look at from the perspective of the general public or the taxpayers, because most of the research are funded by these tax, so there are more and more requests from the taxpayers or general public wanting to know how this money has been spent. So in these circumstances, it is very important for us to learn how to convey this message into plan language summary. And actually this concept or this definition here is from a fact sheet, and aiming to communicate the research of medical or medicine research into the common words and communicate better to patients. So let's take a look at the different types of research communication. For example, this may be able to help you understand what a plan language summary more. So as Yuva mentioned in her sharing just now, basically the research is trying to address the issue between the ideal world and the reality. So the gap between the ideal world and the reality is where the research is trying to solve. They're trying to solve the problem. They're trying to address the issue and find the solutions. So when it comes to communicate for this research, there are several different forms. If we look at from the broader perspective, press release is of course one of the way to communicate your research. However, the target audience is general public. The target audience is the funders. The general public may be patent, for example. And when the science or the research is conveyed into a press release, then of course the target audience might not be very, you can say they have minimum knowledge of what you're doing, of that specific research. So when conveying the message to them, it is very important to address the issue of so-called big why, meaning the gap between the ideal world and the reality. This is kind of related to them. So for example, we all know that climate change is something that affects everybody's life. So if you are doing some kind of research trying to minimize the plastic in a specific, let's say a human body, for example, or in the environment, for example, the main goal is of course to try to address the issue of the climate change, address the issue of the environment. So you need to convey the big why so that people know that, oh, this research is related to me because the environment is related to me. And then address the problem, the immediate problem that you're trying to solve, and that is the why part. As to how you solve it, probably you won't talk too much in your press release, because normally the press release will be rather not very long and not very technical, because you're addressing to audience who are not your field expert. However, when it comes to plain language summary, because what you're trying to do is to convey your research in a simple form, and also trying to differentiate your work with other similar research. So it is very crucial at this moment to convey the message of your solution, meaning the novelty, the originality and novelty of your research, so that the audience can understand a little bit better about what your solution is about and why it is originality and novelty, and why people or the funder, let's say the funders, needs to spend some money on supporting this research. And the research the target audience is basically field experts. So when it comes to field experts, the big why don't need to mention that much, because we all know that climate change affects everybody. We all know that, let's say, cancer is a very severe problem. So we don't need to address that much, but we need to address the problem, and also your solutions, because you're talking to your field experts, and you want to address the novelty of your research, and also the methodology to prove that your research is sound and clear and well designed, right? And when it comes to abstract, of course, the abstract is to convey the whole entire research paper into a more condensed form. The target audience is still field experts. So the abstract will be a condensed version of the problem solution, meaning the why, what, and how. But in the abstract, normally we tend to still make it rather technical, because your solution and your methodology will also be mentioned in the abstract. So it is very likely that you will still have the jargon in your abstract. But that would not be the case for the plan language summary. So the next will be, after we understand the different type of research communication, then it comes to the second part of my sharing, which is writing a good plan language summary. And we see the picture of the so-called big Y, meaning the gap between the ideal world and the reality, and also the problem, the immediate problem we're trying to address. So we could, in the IES way of, in our curation process, when we read a scientific paper and our copywriters and our team members would like to convey the research paper into a plan language summary, this is how we do it. We use a storyboard to convey the message of scientific information into the IES storyboard, like what you see in the right-hand side. So the gap between the big picture is the big Y, and the problem we are trying to address is the Y. So generally, the Y part will be come out from the introduction part of your research paper. And normally the thesis statement, as Yuva just mentioned in her sharing, will be in the introduction part. And that is where the Y part is extracted. And the solution will be, because your novelty and originality will basically lied in this solution part. So that is the what part of the plan language summary. As to how you do it, as to the as to the research method or the methodology, in the plan language summary, we don't talk that too much, but somehow it depends on the article itself. It depends on the research paper. If the research paper is, the significance is on the research method, then of course we will mention it to an extent, but not in a very detailed way. So this is how we create our storyboard, by conveying the research paper. If we look at each section more detail, let's take a look at the Y part first. So the Y part will be the introduction, generally, of your research paper. So in the introduction part, it is very important to address some of the issues by asking questions. For example, what is the immediate problem this research is trying to solve? Actually, this is somehow resonate with the reading part of that when you read a research paper. Because when you read a research paper, most of the time, it will be written by others, right? And when you read that research paper from others, it is very important for you to have some questions in mind, asking yourself when reading it, what is the immediate problem the research is trying to solve? So same goes with your research paper. When you trying to write a plan language summary, ask yourself again, what is the immediate problem you're trying to solve? And trying to convey that message into some kind of sentence, some kind of language that non-field expert can also understand as well. And another question is, how is the solution proposal relevant, let's say, to the research, or relevant to your target audience? So if we look at this example here, this is actually an extract from a research paper. So if we look at it, it is actually the part where the thesis statement is located, mostly at the last paragraph of the introduction, right? So the immediate problem, normally we will mention that, let's say, in this paragraph, I believe that birth order can have a significant impact in the formation of a child's character. This is more like a so-called main idea behind the research, right? And then the concept, the main idea behind the research is that the birth order can have a significant impact in the formation of a child's character. So what the research is trying to find or to support, find the evidence to support that that birth order can strongly affect one's relationship with parents, etc., etc. So ask yourself, what is the immediate problem of the research is trying to solve, and how is the solution proposal relevant to my research? This can be something you can extract from your thesis statement. Next important part is the what part. The what part addresses the novelty of your solution. It shows the actual solution, how your solution can benefit your target audience. How are you trying to enhance the existing process? Are you trying to offer a new solution to a disease? Are you trying to offer some kind of data to shed the light into a different angle?
Oops, I think Iris is facing some connection issue.
Of conducting some of the research. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back. Just now was a bit lagging.
So, sorry?
Just now was lagging a little bit.
Okay, so probably I will start from, restart from this slide.
Sure.
Okay, so the what part, right? The what part is the another very important section because it shows your novelty of your solution. What is the novelty? It can be something like you're trying to enhance the process of the existing process. You're trying to offer a new solution to cure a disease, for example. You're trying to invent or trying to use a new way to increase the survival rate, for example. Or you're trying to dig deeper into the data to find out whether there might be new solution or new angle to look at the existing issues. That's are the novelty of your solution. That is why your research is trying to solve, and that is why your research is different and unique. So when you address the novelty of your solution, it is very important to address the impact your research is trying to make. So, for example, if you are finding a new type of vaccine to COVID-19, for example, then the immediate impact will be, let's say, offer a new solution, offer a new way of cure to address the issue of COVID-19, to ease the burden of COVID-19, for example. And who you're trying to benefit to. So in that case, it will be, of course, everyone, because this is a global level of issue. But if you are trying to, let's say, trying to find the pathway to understand how a specific medicine or how a specific drug is functioning in human body, then the target audience or the immediate impact of to who you're trying to impact will be those who has the disease or those who has the issue of that illness. And where and to which group and to what extent of your impact will be benefit to. Is it national level? Is it local level? Or is it global level, for example? And what kind of change it will try to make. So we will talk about it later in different angle about this novelty of the solution. Now the third part is the big why. The big why is the way that you communicate with your target audience on how your research is actually changing their life. So in a way that how we convey the message, one of the angle that we're trying to make is using the United Nations SDG, because we know that nowadays policymakers or even research institutions are now trying to achieve the goal of the UN SDG, and many of the research or many of the message that they convey to the public is using the UN SDG. So the way that we do it is to link the research into the proper UN SDG. But of course, this is only one way of doing it. You can surely address the issue of the wider picture, let's say climate change, for instance, without linking it into SDG. That is totally fine. But basically the concept behind the big why, or we can say the so what of the message that of your research, is that to try to connect your audience to what they really care about, to their issues that close to their everyday life. So that is the message of the big why we're trying to convey. So of course, all this information, you might find it overwhelming. So in this project that we are working with NIH, as Casey just mentioned, we do prepare a form of workbook for everyone to get to understand better about how to write a plain language summary and how actually you can start to write a plain language summary. It is more like a guideline in the form of the question. So if you're interested in starting writing the plain language summary of your research, I would encourage you to use that workbook. And in that workbook, we raise a few questions helping you to organize your thoughts, to convey your research, complicated research message into a more simple form. So in that workbook, questions that we raise to help you to convey the message is to break down into the different part of the big why, and what. So in the section of the what part, questions that we encourage you to ask yourself is that what are the short-term and long-term contribution of your research? It is more like a contribution part of your research, how your research can actually contribute in a short-term and long-term form. What changes will your research bring about when it is implemented or shared? Is it providing a new solution to a cure? Is it increase the survival rate of a certain group of the patient with a specific disease? And what is the level of influence of your research? So who are you helping, or what are you helping? Are you helping a specific group of people, let's say a specific group of the patients who are with specific disease? Or are you helping to enhance the process of the current practice? For example, are you trying to offer a SOP to the, let's say, patient care? Are you trying to experiment your research in a local environment, a local hospital, or are you trying to expand this current research into, let's say, country level? So this is the level of influence. And then what supports or channels are needed to realize your work? For example, if you're trying to implement your work and you will need, let's say, using some kind of activity, for example, you are trying to use a process, for example, or you are increase the understanding of your audience, for example. So these are the difference, or these are the different support or channels that you're trying to need your need to realize your work. So you can take a look at the image at the left-hand side of the slide. I know it is not that big, but we can share with you later in the bigger picture the difference between on the contribution, change, levels, and avenues of your research. Next is the question to ask when you are trying to address the big why. The big why is trying to, as we mentioned, connect your research to the audience. So if you remembered that in the press release form, we address a lot on the big why because it conveys the message better into the target audience. So the big why will be, for example, the question that we encourage you to ask is, why are your research or why are your results newsworthy? The way, the reason why we're trying to ask you why it is newsworthy because because it will trigger your message into some kind of a message, or trigger your idea, trigger your thoughts into if your research is going to impress everybody, and how or to which angle that this can be triggered everyone's attention, for example. Okay? And the next question will be, if you're connecting your research into the SDG, so which SDG goal are you trying to address? And how your research is helping to, and how is your research is actually contribute to this SDG goal. There are 17 SDG goals, and of course, if we are talking about medical research, then the most relevant one will be the number 3, good health and well-being. But is your research is only limited to number 3? In our experiences, actually, a lot of research is overlapping, but with, let's say, a different number of SDG. Of course, there will be a very intuitive one, for example, number 3. However, it can also accompanied by another SDG goal. So it is more like trying to widen your audience, trying to attract as much audience as possible to, and also let them know that your research is connecting to not only the good health, but also the environment, for example. And also, what is the next step of your research? We all know that research is a small step towards fixing the issue or addressing the issue. But of course, taking many little steps can lead to addressing a wider issue or addressing a wider problem. So what is the next step of your research? It is more like what is your path towards a bigger goal? So these are the questions that we encourage you to ask when writing about Big Why. And of course, the why part. What is the research question that you're trying to solve? What is the immediate question, and how the need to explore this question came about? So why are you doing it? Why are you enhancing the process? Is it because the current practice is needs a lot of budget to maintain, for example? And why it is important, or why it is exciting for me or for you to explore this question? It might be something personal. It might be something from your personal experience. For example, like this example we shared in the slide. It gives you a more personal touch on the sharing of the plan language summary. Your personal experience can also be somebody else's personal experience, and it resonates very well with when you're conveying the message to others. So these are the questions that we encourage you to ask when you're addressing the why issue of the good plan language summary. So let's take a look at a few examples here. So that you may understand better. So this article or this research that we show here is trying to find a solution for existing problems, a new solution. Okay, so in the way that we convey the plan language summary in the IES form is we call the IES story. Of course, there are different formats of the plan language summary, but today, because in this project, what we're trying to do is we trying to convey your research into the form of IES story. So that is why we take the example here. So in the format of the plan language summary of the IES story here, we tend to address the what part in the first paragraph, which is the novelty of your research. The why part is described as background, and the big why is described as SDG impact. This is where we connect your research into the actual SDG impact. So if we look at this example closer, if you remember, the what part is basically the immediate issue you're trying to solve and the uniqueness of originality and novelty of your research, right? So in this case, as you can see that the novelty part is that this research is about, as you can see that the heading here, okay, we will talk about the heading later. We know that one question is raised for Yuva on the heading part. So as you can see from the heading part, a plan language summary, it doesn't need to have the same heading or the same title as the research article, because in the research article, it tends to be try to be as clear as possible. So very likely you will have some kind of technical term or jargon in your title of the paper. So when you're trying to write the plan language summary, you have the chance to use the title in a different way. So in this example is creating energy efficient LEDs. Although in the message of the novelty part, it used one specific method to trying to create these kind of energy efficient as LED. And because the highlight, the novelty part is that specific method, so in that plan language summary, we still need to address the name of that specific method. So as you can see, the researcher is trying to use this method, and this method can significantly reduce the defect of the surface of the nitrate film. And then it can enhance the quality by 10 to 20% due to the reduction of defect density. It is trying to address how his method can enhance the quality, and by providing the measurable amount of, let's say, percentage, it can actually shows how significant, or it can actually attract readers' attention, and it can also prove how much it can actually enhance. So when you try to address the novelty and originality of your plan, of your research into the plan language summary, it is very crucial for you to address the change or the so-called the impact you're trying to, your solution is trying to bring, and present with the audience with a measurable, let's say, a number, for example, percentage, for example. Okay, so next is the why part. The why part, if you remember, is the background, why you're doing this research. So in this example, it tells us that production of LED materials have always been challenging due to defect densities, high production costs, and complex production. So it addressed the background and why his research and his method is trying to solve. And what his research is trying to solve is, this study offers a convenient and cost-effective technique for preparing a better material. And it makes clean energy available and affordable to everyone. When it comes to the big, and if we look the concept of make clean energy available and affordable to everyone, it will lead to, let's say, the SDG of the 7th SDG goal of creating affordable and clean energy. And it also encourages the consumers to opt for the obvious better choices of because it's more cost effective and it is less pollution to the environment. So this is more toward the bigger picture of a more clean environment. And if we look at the second example, this is a different research, and this research is focusing on observation. And this is somehow many situations in, let's say, biology, for example. And this observation is about take a closer look at the tree hopper helmet structure. The same, because it is an IA story, so we take the what part to address the novelty, the background to address the why, the SDG impact to address the big why. So because it is an observation, so what exactly does it observe? It trying to observe and trying to lay out the detail of these 3D structure development of the tree hopper helmets of that specific insect. So what is these observations trying to find out, right? So it tries to find out the key development stage of the tree hopper helmet formation is to identify the specific development stage of that specific insect, because it might be the current observation is lacking, right? So what is the whole idea? Why do we need to observe it? What does it connect to the audience? What the audience can be benefit from this kind of observation? So in the Big Why, the author mentioned that it leads to a number of useful technical or architectural innovations. It might not be the immediate effect, but it brings you a bigger picture. And this example is about enhancement of current process. So as you can see that in this example, okay, let me go through the Big Why part. In this example, we still have some kind of jargon in the heading. That's because sometimes it is not avoidable, because in many of our previous curation project, when we talk about plain language summary, we always encourage everyone to avoid the jargon, avoid the technical term. But sometimes it is very hard to avoid. But however, when the technical term is still need to be presented in the plain language summary, we also encourage everyone to give that term a easy and simple explanation, so that the audience can understand what this term is about. They don't need to know the detail of that jargon, but they need to know what it means. Okay, so in this example, we will see that we still put the jargon here, but we also provide it with an explanation of that specific jargon. So this research is about understanding about the background radiation. It is more like physics. So the novelty is actually, it shows that for the first time, they showcase blah, 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 and it also provides insight into the radioactive containments presented in the detector and influence. So this is the novelty part. You may see that we still have some jargons here, because it is very hard to avoid, especially because it might relate it to some of the let's say chemical compound or materials. And this one is very specific. But by using the language of connecting to the audience, showing this is the first research ever to do what and what. So we show the novelty part, and the background is to understand and enhance the performance and maximize the potential of what and what, such and such a solution. And what is the Big Why, of course? By understanding it, the finding could be used to provide important parameters when laboratory-based systems are employed under the field environment. So it might be not as big as a very far away picture as the climate change, but it could be used to apply it into a, let's say, a lab environment or related field. Okay, so we just show you the example of the IES story, but is that format of IES story the only one format of plain language summary? No, because you might heard of that many researchers, let's say Elsevier, is also encouraging researchers to provide a research highlight when you are trying to, let's say, submit your research paper. So, so that it can become in very different format. Let's say Elsevier, they call it research highlight, and the AGU, they call it lay summary, for example. And if you
Oops, I think we have lost her connection. Sorry about that. Let's just give her a couple of minutes for her to reconnect. So for those that joined late, just now I think I did mention that Iris did highlighted that there is a workbook link as well. So I will just repaste it again at this Google Drive here. And the whole purpose of this curation workbook is for your self-practice. So basically you could, what Iris has shared earlier, some of the tips on how do you extract out those your novelty, your big why. So you could actually use that method to fill it up on the curation workbook that I just shared, and you can test it out with your own actual research publication as well. So like you could try it out to extract, you read back, and you can fill up the workbook, and if you need some tips or feedback, you could share that workbook to us, and we are more than happy to help you to filter it out and sharpen the message a little bit, then so that you could write your PLS on your own for other publication as well. But for the 20 selected papers, that one everything will be basically we'll be doing on behalf. So like just now, I remember one of the participants did highlight they want some examples of their paper. That one will be basically using this whole approach, and we will draft out the whole plain language summary for them to review with the group individually. Oops. Yep. So I just received an update from Iris. Her laptop was hanged, so I think she's restarting right now. So how does everyone feel so far? Good, bad? Let's take since she went out, we can just take a short 1 minute break. Feedback. Good. Is it good, or is it, what do you guys think?
I'm back.
Oh, okay. Iris is back.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So let me reshare my screen. Okay. Okay, so can everyone see it?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. My laptop just abandoned me very quickly. So, okay. Anyway, let's restart from this slide. Okay, so as we just mentioned, that is IES Story the only one format? Of course not, because there are many other ways or formats in the scientific research communication world that you might encounter from time to time. So let's say from Elsevier, they might call it research highlight, and it actually has a different format of that highlight, a bit different from plain language summary. However, it is still something that you would like to address in a simple way, because it is something complement to the abstract, right? So if you see the example here with the Elsevier and also the middle one, space weather from AGU, it is more like for the publisher's perspective, the way that they present the plan language summary is it goes side by side with the abstract. So the abstract is basically for the field experts, while the plan language summary is addressing to a wider audience who might not be a field expert in the same field as yours. However, it might be someone who is, let's say, because all of you are in the medical research, right? But medicine or healthcare is such a big subject, and even if you're in, let's say, cardiology or in the specific area of medicine, you might not be exactly know what other research or other researchers is about. So the plan language summary is basically for someone who is not in your research field, who might be related to your research field, but because there are threshold or barriers in today's research disciplines, so it is very important for people who might not be your research field can also understand your research work, especially when it comes to collaboration and so-called application, or let's say multidisciplinary research. And for publishers, this kind of plan language summary go side by side when the manuscript is submitted. However, if you have already submitted your paper and your paper is already published, how can you still present a plan language summary in, let's say, on the internet? There are such services as well. One is, of course, the IES Story, and also there are other service providers like Kudos. They can also help you to write or put your plan language summary onto the platform to broadcast or to disseminate it into wider audience. So in summary, basically, when you're trying to write a good plan language summary, or when you're trying to write a plan language summary or a lay summary, it is very important for you to identify the big why, and what part of your research. So novelty and the background, and also how it connects to the wider audience. Because remember, your target audience is not someone from your field. They can be your patients, they can be your supervisors, they can be your fund agencies, they can be your management board. So it is very important to talk to them in the language that they understand and addressing the issue that they are faced every day in their lives. The number 2 is focusing on the evidence and the impact. You don't talk too much on the methodology or the technical jargon. You try to present your impact to who, to where, to what group, to what extent, and also provide a measurable evidence, so that people, when they are reading your plan language summary and they read a term like it gives a significant increase, but if you are fail to provide them with a measurable, let's say, percentage or the number, then they will ask you, when you say significant, how significant is that? So focus on evidence, on measurable part, and also the impact part. The number 3 is, of course, connect to the bigger thing, so it relates to your audience. And the number 4 is to trying to avoid the technical expression. not only the technical jargon, but also technical expression. The way we're trying to write the research paper is make it as technical and detailed as much as possible. That is not the case when writing a plain language summary. So that are basically these 4 rules that we would like to share with you on writing a plain language summary. Okay, so this is my sharing today, and sorry about the hiccup we just experienced, and welcome any questions.
Right. Thanks, Iris, for sharing this. So I think this topic would trigger several questions from the mind of all our audiences here. So right now, yep, if you guys have any questions, you feel free to just type it at the chat box. And I've already seen 2 questions throughout. So the first question is, how do we determine whether if our findings are newsworthy? Is there any mechanism that we could do some groundwork to check, or where should we benchmark? Is there any what are your thoughts on this?
Right. Sometimes I feel that the term newsworthy is a little bit, how to say it? You might feel that it is a little far away, right? So you might think, my research is not going to, or is not significant enough, or I'm not confident enough to be on the news. So why do I need to think about that? But if you, let's say, because all of you are in the healthcare and medicine. So healthcare and medicine is actually I would say, one of the most important issues that people care about. So any progress, any new solutions, any enhanced methodology or any enhanced practice would be some small step toward curing a disease or providing people with a better healthcare environment, or helping to improve, let's say, the survival rate of a specific disease. So every small research, no matter how small it is, it has its significance. So trying to find that significance. So I remember when I first, in my first or second curation workshop, we were talking to a doctor, a physician actually, and he actually doesn't have much time doing his research, because his time will be spent mostly on talking to patients and in the hospital, in the operation, for example. But because his time is so much dedicated into the operation, he doesn't even think about how this operation may change his patient's life. He look at that operation, he look at the methodology of that operation so much. When we ask him, oh, okay, so this new way of operation is actually quite innovative, and he said, oh, do you think so? So what I'm trying to say is, I would say, if you are not sure how, to express the significance of your research, trying to talk to your neighbor, to your friends, who is not exactly in your field, trying to talk to them what your research is about. and let them ask questions. And that will bring you new ideas, shed some new lights, and also it will help you to look in your research in a totally different angle, which you might not observe or which you might not see previously when you're doing your research. I hope that answered the question.
Yep. Thanks, Iris. I think that is pretty important because like whatever research that we do, that's how the emphasis of big why becomes important, that it builds the connection, because a lot of time like some of the research is very focused on very specific, unlike topics like, of course, like COVID-19 right now, any research you do then definitely is newsworthy. Any small discovery related to COVID-19, it will go viral. But some of the research are pretty like niche and very focused. And that part, like, I remember I do have one customer in Indonesia, like the researchers is focusing on doing something very niche on Malay, like batik cultural design. So this is something that it's very focused. So, but in a way it is focused. You still need to figure out the big why. How does this research could connect with the impact? Like you shape a lot more on the cultural, batik culture, to how do we preserve the culture so that it could pass on generations over generations. It becomes like a historical kind of a rule. So yeah, that emphasize on, I mean, the emphasis on the big why, the importance of big why. So that basically leads to an, I mean, there's a second question which I find it quite interesting as well, which is, Iris, you mentioned earlier that about the level of influence. You need to identify the level of influence when talking about the novelty part. But there's a query here. Wouldn't that limit the outreach in a way where, when you are too focused on one specific area, your potential readers might just like pass it on and read because they thought that, oh, this is not for me, then they would like skip your research. So how do we actually like juggle or have a solution for it to basically balance out this part where is it better to be very specific or not? One example is that if this research is basically working on influence the practice in specific district clinic, let's say in Malaysia, but the problem might also occur in bigger hospital or even like in other countries as well. So how should we phrase the message when it comes to writing the PLS?
Right. Yes, that is so for example, the example, Casey, you just shared, let's say your current practice is in a local level hospital, for example, a local practice. But of course, it may eventually goes to a higher level or larger level as regional or even country level or even the global level. But at this moment, it is still at the regional level, so or the let's say local level. So in the plan language summary or in your research article, of course, you will mention that this is still a practice in your local area. However, if it goes well, right? And if we take a further step into, let's say, in 5 years, 10 years time, 20 years time, it can be applied to country level. So I would say that because we have the why and the what and the big why, right? And in the immediate impact, it is at the local level, yes. However, if it applies, if it goes well, then in 5 years time, in 10 years time, in 20 years time, it can be applied to a country level or even global level. That is the part you can put in your big why. So Yuva, you have more experience on that. Probably you can also share some idea about it. but this is how I see it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically from my perspective, if let's just say I come across a paper and I would like to structure the level of influence, I wouldn't, I mean, okay, you have to look at what the plain language summary functions as. So there's the plain language summary, there's the abstract. So they are usually next to each other, or people actually look at the plain language summary first before looking into the abstract. So when a person looks into the plain language summary, the idea that they want to get is what is, in a simpler term, what is the contribution of this paper. So when you are trying to highlight the contribution of the paper, my suggestion would be, when you mention the level of influence, you do not limit it to just within a district. You actually look at it from a bigger picture point of view, because I look at this question, right? So the example given here is that if our research may influence the practice at district clinic, but the problem might also occur in bigger hospitals. So if you look at this example, if you were to rephrase your level of influence, what you could do is that instead of giving it a definitive compound, you sort of put it in a wider perspective. You say that this practice could influence future medical practices, whether it is in the clinical context or in a hospital context. So you open it up. Try not, when you set your level of influence, you try not to set it to the most narrow part of it. You try to widen it, but that also you have to thread carefully, because you don't want to overpromise people. So you have to have that juggle when it comes to describing the level of influence. And it also helps if you know exactly who your plain language summary is going to. So if you are looking at the plain language summary targeted to just a wider group of audience, then you try to make it as wide as possible. But if you want the plain language summary to target to specifically clinic practitioners, then you can actually scope it to become narrow. So it depends exactly what is your function of the plain language summary. So that is my take on this. So the rephrasing or the structuring or the way you define your level of influence has to match who you are exactly messaging this thing towards.
Right. Perfect.
I think you mentioned a very good point, is that the target audience of the plain language summary, because in my sharing just now, I mean, my target audience is, I always listed a few examples, right? Mm-hmm. However, because for one research paper, there can be as many plain language summary as possible. So, for example, one research paper, you must have one abstract, one version of abstract. You probably don't have chance to offer it for another abstract, because it go along with the manuscript when submitting with the paper. However, plain language summary is something that you can create as much as possible. So you can create a plain language summary, let's say focusing to your fund agencies. You can create one plain language summary for your patients. So it can be targeted into different audience, and you can disseminate it to different channels, so that your message can actually convey or taken to your target audience. So depending on different target audience, the angle or the way of writing the plain language summary can be different.
Yep, that's right. Basically, like what Iris and Yuvarani shared. I mean, plain language summary is basically the teaser of your entire research publication, which you could have definitely more than one if you would like to target on specific audience group. If then you could focus, then it would be more connected and aligns with the audience objective as well. Let's say if you are talking to a funder, you basically would be talking of funder related to specific district in Malaysia context, for example. Then is of course it would be very good if you, let's say you're putting all the focus solely on how can you improve the Malaysia medical system or sort of those sort of figures. It definitely will help to get the connection much better. Okay. So I think we run a little bit out of time, but there's one more last question. Let's just take a look. This is basically one common question that I think a lot of people would get confused as well, which is related to the jargon. So as you all thought about PLS, plain language, is supposed to be plain, right? But is it really so? So how do we juggle, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of technical terms that maybe it does not seem like a jargon to me, but to another people from another researcher from a different discipline, it might become like a disaster or something to them. So how do we juggle that, or should we juggle in between this thing to cope with it? Any suggestions?
Right. Yes, jargon is sometimes not easy to avoid or not easy to convey into a more simple term. However, let's say if we are talking about medical research, right? And the medical research or even the chemical research, when you talk about when your research is about specific chemical material or even a specific compound, there might be no equivalent term to describe that in simple language. However, if you can reference to, let's say, if you have a thesaurus in your field, and normally the way the thesaurus is arranged like this, it has a broader term and it has narrow term, it has similar term. So for example, if we are talking about a chair, right? A very simple example, a chair, then the narrow term might be a stool, or might be sorry about part of my English. I don't have. So you get the idea. So the similar term or related term might be sofa, for example, something that you can sit on, right? But they're different. So this is what thesaurus is trying to convey, especially in a specific research field. So if you look at the thesaurus, you will find a narrow term or broader term. Normally, if your research is about very specific term, then maybe I will suggest you to go look at the broader term. But of course, because broader term cannot describe exactly what you're trying to say, so maybe you can accompany it with a few words or a few sentences of explanation. That is one way. And also, it is possible that we cannot avoid it at all. But in that case, I would say try not to use the initial. So right now we all know that COVID is, for example, IHS, the term IHS, it might have one meaning in, let's say, chemical field, but it will have, let's say, another meaning in biomedicine field. So if you are using the short form of the initial of your technical term, it is, and you cannot avoid it, it is very important that you put the full name onto it, or you put a simple explanation next to it, so that people are not from your field will not be mixed up with the same term in another field. that is how I see it. But Yuva, do you want to share your thought about that?
Okay, I can try. Maybe I can give some examples because I've worked on a lot of papers before. So the thing about reducing jargon is that there are jargons that are used in the field as well as there are technical terms. So many times people don't understand the difference between should I simplify the technical term or should I simplify the jargon? So what I mean by that is that if let's just say you are okay, analgesic, okay? So analgesic, okay, is actually painkillers, okay? So that is to treat. So the term is actually very common among doctors, among physicians, even among researchers from that similar field. But if you were to speak to someone, let's just say if a patient comes to you and actually asks you, you don't use that term, right? You use the term painkillers instead. So if you have a replaceable term for that particular jargon that you're using, then you, by all means, please do replace it. But if let's just say if you have the medication name, perhaps like morphine. Okay, I know morphine is quite commonly used, but then if let's just say the word morphine is there and you cannot replace the word morphine with anything else, or else the whole the entire thing becomes different, right? So then you still have to use back that term morphine. So the technical term that is crucial, that is what Iris was trying to mention. So if the technical term that it's specific and that is fitting and there's no other replacement for it, then you, by all means, you can still use it. Perhaps you could elaborate the functions of it so that people would understand. Elaborate the functions, or perhaps give it a definition. But if let's just say you have got terms that you can replace with a simpler term, you can always replace it. Try to always replace it with a simpler term or more common term. And another thing is that give it to someone else to read. Don't give it to someone from your field. Don't give it to your colleague. Perhaps you can call someone else within the same office. Let's just say if you've got an admin staff, you probably just pass it to them and say, what do you understand from this? So they could actually tell you what they understand. That would actually help you to rephrase the sentence, or the words that they ask you, actually, doctor, what does this mean? If you can actually explain that particular term in another word or using another word, then that is the word that you're supposed to put it into the plain language summary. But if there is no other term for that, then you just say, oh no, it's actually a type of drug, and then you have to use the drug name. So that is how I see it when you are looking at plain language summary writing. And there's no way to go jargon free. Like entirely free, it's quite hard. You will still use some words, but try to reduce the frequency of you using those words. And also the main reason for it is to smoothen the entire reading and comprehension process for the readers. So you have to juggle with that. So that is my take on this.
Right, so I hope that helps. Thanks, Iris and Yuva, for the sharing. So I think we'll put an end for today's session. So if you have any other questions, feel free to drop us an email. There's an email address listed at the screen right now. You can just drop in an email and they will be more than happy to answer your question offline as well. So for that, we will end the session for today. For tomorrow's session, same time, 10 o'clock, there will be by the graphical abstract part. So today's session is basically all the women. Tomorrow will be the men's session, right? So the men's session part will be on at this stage, we assume that we basically have completed the plain language summary we have written up. So tomorrow's session is how you enhance this plain language summary with visuals, graphics. How do you come up with some supporting to further enhance the understanding of your particular research. And lastly, we have to do the promotion to reach out to the targeted audience. Okay, so by then I'll see you guys tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Take care and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.